Welcome back to Ben's Book Club. Today we are diving into the book Never Finished: Unshackle Your Mind and Win the War Within. We're looking at a pretty fascinating dilemma today, something I like to call the sequel problem. So, think about it for a second. What happens when the ultimate underdog, someone who has literally fought through unimaginable trauma and hardship, finally achieves massive, life-changing success? Fighting against failure is one thing, but the battle against the comfort of victory, that is an entirely different beast. Comfort quietly threatens to ruin the very edge that made that success possible in the first place. This explainer breaks down exactly how to handle that incredibly dangerous transition.
David Goggins is, for sure, an absolute icon of endurance. We know him as the retired Navy SEAL and ultra-marathoner who pushes the human body way past the breaking point. But even he discovered a really terrifying truth. Success can actually become dangerous if it makes you complacent, because comfort can quietly lower your standards. You see, back in 2021, he faced a life-threatening atrial fibrillation heart diagnosis, and this wasn't a challenge he could just outrun. It completely shattered his sense of invincibility. It forced him to confront the scary reality that the relentless mental armor he had built up to survive his past was actually starting to work against him. He realized that being hard on the outside didn't automatically mean he had fully healed on the inside.
So, you'd think after winning the VFW Americanism Award in 2018 and the massive success of his first book, he might just coast, right? Well, instead of taking it easy, this 2021 heart diagnosis forced a massive pivot. He pushed himself into completely new, grueling arenas. Take the Moab 240 race. He suffered severe medical crises there, took an official did not finish, but then actually returned to unofficially complete the mileage anyway. Then, at age 47, he decides to become a parachuting wildland firefighter, a smoke jumper, competing against recruits half his age. He deliberately chose friction over the finish line.
If you read Goggins' first book, Can't Hurt Me, you know it was this incredible origin story, all about overcoming baseline trauma, surviving an abusive childhood, and beating physical limitations. But Never Finished? That is an operational playbook for maintaining your edge after you've found success. It tackles the much harder, messier task of continuous self-mastery when life actually gets easier. You know, when you have the money, the accolades, and that temptation to just sit on the couch becomes almost overwhelming. The absolute greatest threat in this post-success reality is what's known as the false summit. It's this dangerous illusion that achieving a major goal is the final finish line. Have you ever worked tirelessly for a promotion or a fitness goal or a degree, and the second you got it, your discipline just completely evaporated? That right there is the danger of the false summit. It allows complacency to quietly erode your standards. Reaching a milestone can make us incredibly soft if we fail to recognize it for what it truly is, merely a temporary plateau in a lifelong battle of growth. You might already be familiar with his famous 40% rule. It's the idea that when your brain says you are completely done, you're usually only at 40% of your actual physical capacity. But here, that physical rule evolves into emotional endurance. This is all about emotional vulnerability. He forces himself to confront the psychological masks that people wear. We all build these personas to protect our wounded inner selves, right? Hiding our insecurities behind a tough exterior or playing the class clown. Well, tapping into that remaining 60% now means having the sheer endurance to rip those masks off. To actually rip those masks off, you need a highly specific environment, the mental lab. In this space, you aren't just the subject of your life. You are the lead researcher, running brutal experiments on your own mental limits. The mental lab is Goggins' unvarnished method for self-experimentation. It requires totally isolating yourself from distractions, so you can objectively dissect your fears, your failures, and your insecurities. This is the exact opposite of toxic positivity. You don't ignore the bad stuff. You drag it into the lab, tear it apart, and figure out how to convert that raw pain into usable energy. Inside that lab sits his famous accountability mirror, but the reflection has completely changed. It's no longer just about stripping away the victim mindset. Now you must acknowledge your emotional blind spots. Ask yourself, are you pushing people away because you are truly dedicated to your craft, or because you are just avoiding deep connection? Ultimately, you have to hold yourself to an evolving standard when absolutely nobody is watching. It's no longer just taking inventory of physical flaws. It's a ruthless, ongoing audit of your character. All of this intense preparation really comes down to a single micro moment, the 1-second decision. In moments of extreme suffering, whether you are going through a literal Navy SEAL hell week, facing a total career collapse, or recovering from a major injury, the critical choice happens in a split second. It's that exact moment where your brain is begging you to quit and you have to decide whether to stay in the fight. That 1 second of choosing friction over comfort alters the entire trajectory of everything that follows in your life. And this 1 second decision reveals a massive divide in how we handle suffering. A victim mindset uses past trauma as a permanent excuse. It focuses on entitlement, this feeling that you've suffered enough and you deserve a long rest. The mental lab mindset, however, views that exact same trauma as usable energy. Pain and fatigue aren't roadblocks. They're signals that real psychological restructuring is happening. You don't wait to feel better. You harvest the crisis as raw fuel for continuous growth. So this obviously requires a brutal level of self-awareness. When you suddenly hit a wall, how do you tell the difference between real burnout and simple mental resistance? It is a super fine line. When you're pursuing a massive goal, is your body actually failing, or is your mind just throwing a tantrum because it prefers the pouch? Answering this requires deep introspection, because our brains are incredibly talented at disguising laziness as legitimate fatigue. To find out if it's real burnout, you have to use a technique called wringing out the sponge. This means pushing slightly past the point where you genuinely believe you are 100% exhausted. Why do this? Because that is the only way to perform a true mental postmortem. Think about it. When you fail a goal, do you just shrug and move on? Or do you objectively analyze whether you actually lacked the capacity, or if you simply stopped when the friction became uncomfortable? Wringing the sponge proves to you, without a doubt, that there were always a few more drops of effort left. Goggins put this into practice through deliberate, relentless exposures to friction. He used the Leadville Trail 100 as a brutal wake-up challenge. He suffered pulmonary edema at the Moab 240, but still returned to finish unofficially. He underwent high-risk knee surgery and just weeks later took second place in a 444-mile bike race. And let's not overlook the sheer absurdity of joining a smoke jumper school at age 47, willingly jumping out of planes to fight wildfires. He designed these tests specifically to callous his mind against the seduction of his newfound wealth and success. These extreme tests reveal a core truth: motivation is fundamentally flawed. Motivation is fleeting. It relies entirely on external inspiration, like a great song, an inspiring video, or just waking up in a surprisingly good mood. Goggins completely rejects relying on motivation. Discipline, on the other hand, is built over time through repeated, deliberate exposure to hardship. You don't wait around to feel inspired to do the work, you do the hard work daily, especially when you despise it, because the action itself is what builds the belief. We do have to ask ourselves, though, is this relentless sadomasochism of the mind actually sustainable discipline, or is it just self-punishment? It's deeply worth debating whether constantly seeking point-blank suffering is healthy for the average person. Does this operational playbook empower us to be our best selves, or does it risk driving toxic self-criticism where we never, ever feel like we are enough? The line between healthy accountability and self-punishment is razor thin, and Goggins walks right on the edge of it. Fortunately, you don't have to run 200 miles on a broken knee to use these tools. You can apply these evolutions right now by incorporating them into your daily routine. Start by performing a daily mental postmortem on a micro-failure. Analyze exactly where you quit too early today. Then look inward to identify just one mask you wear to protect your ego, and practice taking it off. You can combine this with choosing a deliberate discomfort to execute this week, whether that's taking a cold shower or having a really difficult conversation. It all comes back to adopting the mindset of built, not born, treating your life as an ongoing construction project where greatness is assembled brick by brick, not granted by genetics. Remember, life has no finish line. What looks like a limit is usually just a plateau. It's a powerful reminder that there is no final victory bell. Greatness isn't something you achieve and put on a shelf to collect dust. It is an everyday practice. So, are you resting on a false summit right now? Drop the excuses, get back into your mental lab, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.